We thank Hashem that we're able to learn. It's chus of our learning. We should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. All the revelations from Mashiach. Megillas Esther. We reveal the concealments. Okay, everyone should be well. I'm going to start Daf Tes. Minani Mila de Taner Rabbanan. It's 9 lines from the top. Yeah, this is what we said. Aleha, the word Aleha, Yevama, Yavay Aleha, and Achaisa, Isha Lachaisa Lisikach, Litzar Bechaya, Aleha Bechayeha. That limud taught me that Yibam does not take place if there's another prohibition there. That's what we learned from that. So why would I have thought that? We went through a whole discussion. Comes along Rebbe and says, actually, I have another source that Yibam doesn't take place when there's another prohibition. The pasuk says, Ki yeshvu achem yachdav, the brothers will sit together, meisachem yam, Yevama yavay aleh ulakacha le'lisha v'yibma. So from the word ulakacha, he will take, and v'yibma, I learned that both of them, both wives need to be permissible, and he gets to choose one of them. Okay, that's what we learned. What does he do with Aleha? So the Gemara says, you know what he does with Aleha? He uses Aleha to tell me, it says Aleha twice, but the Aleha by Isha Elachaisa Lisikach, Litzar Tzar Bechaya, Aleha Bechayaha, that Aleha is coming to teach me that what type of sin incurs the chatas offering is only if it's davish karis v'shigagase chatas, just like marrying his wife's sister. We learn that from Aleha. So, and we went through the different sacrifices that all of those chatas or is basically the par kaina Mashiach, the par helam davar, the nasi, the yachid, all of those is all when someone does a sin b'shegeg that b'mesid would have been an iser kares. Minahani mili, where do we know this? The Taner Rabbanan was taught in a brayso v'naida achatas ashechat wala. This is referring to the par helam davar shel tzibur. That's when the Bezdin, the Sanhedrin, makes a mistake, and the congregation violates. The congregation practices exactly what the Bezdin paskind. It turned out it was a mistake, so they have to bring it's called a par, a bull, a helam davar for the mistake that was made. Okay, so now, so far, this is where we're holding. Rebbe Yomer nemer kan aleha, v'nemer lahalan aleha. Notice that it says the mistake, the sin that they sinned upon it. It says aleha, and it also says somewhere else aleha, where we know what that is. That aleha is isha lachaisa, not to marry a wife and her sister. Just like over there, marrying one woman with her sister is isakaris, b'mezid, and if it's by mistake, it's a sin offering. Well, we also know that the par helam davar shel tzibur is going to be that sort of mistake, not a mistake on something that's not so significant. It has to be something that's actually a real sin that would have been kares. Okay. Gemara says, okay, ashkechan tzibur. We have the tzibur. That means par helam davar shel tzibur. You have one sacrifice here that you know that it only comes because of zidayni kares v'shigase chatas, only such a sin. How do we have that? From the aleha. That's all we were looking for. We digress over here and we get sidetracked, but really we have our answer for what we were looking for. We have the aleha. We continue. Mashiach minalan. Where do we know that the Kohen Gadol that makes a mistake, where do we know that his mistake is also going to be only in a case of Zdainei Karis V'Shigagasi Chatas. And on purpose, it would have been Karis, and by mistake, it would have been it's a Karban Chatas. How do I know that that's the type of mistake we're dealing with? It says, Diksiv Mashiach La'ashma Sa'am, Harei Mashiach Ketziver. It says, to the guilt of the people. When he makes a mistake, it says over there, to the guilt of the people. Well, it compares it to the people. That means that it's going to be the same category of sin, same category of mistake as the congregation offering, which that was only Zedani Karis Shigasi Chatas. Yachid Benasi, what about a regular person? Or what about a king that does a mistake? It says Asya mitzvahs. So this is a real easy one. And each one of these paragraphs, which is last week's Torah portion, Perek Daled in Vayikra, it goes through one after another. Each one it says, V'asasa achas mikol mitzvahs Hashem asher loisei asena. Right? So it says in each one mitzvahs, they're all compared one to another. So if this one is because of a Zedani Karis Shigasi Chatas, so too the rest of them. Now we requote the Brisa. We go back. The Brisa also said that if there's a mistake in Avodah Zarah, and the people, there's a psak in Avodah Zarah, and the people also practice Avodah Zarah with one of the four practices, one of the four services that would be kares. So then they have to bring a special sacrifice. Now, what are those kares things? It's either shechting, or burning, or incense, or pouring wine. Only the actual what would have been done in the Beis Hamikdash as a service, that wouldn't be done. But it said cleaning in front of it, or hugging it, or kissing it, that wouldn't be what would incur the sacrifice. So we say now, those sacrifices that we have to bring for Avodah Zarah, if someone worships Avodah Zarah, be based on a mistake in Psak, that's only if it was one of those services. We say, this one is allowed. How do we know this? We're going to divide this into two categories. Actually, we'll have a third one soon. But if the community commits the sin of Avodah Zarah, so how do we know by the way, what sacrifice did they bring? If the community commits a sin, they bring two sacrifices. They bring par la'ola and asar lachatas. This is in Parsha Shlach. Yeah, Parsha Shlach is, and those Parshas in Bamidbar, you get thrown in things that you're very not expecting. I mean, once you think you're in the desert, you think you're going to be talking about the travels. You hear about the Saita and the Nazir, and then you hear about Chala, and then you have the Sar of Avodah Zarah. Then you hear about pouring the wine on offerings, and then you're back in Machlekes with Kairach. So, okay. So over there, one of the things it says is the sacrifice for Avodah Zarah. If the community commits a sacrifice, there's two paragraphs, one after another in that parsha. It says Yalef me'ene me'ene. It says Im ne'lama me'ene ha'ida. So, and then it says by the regular sin back in Vayikra, if the Bezdin Paskin ne'lama me'ene ha'ida, over there it says, but by both of them it says Ein ha'ida, the eyes of the congregation is referring to the Sanhedrin. So we learn that comparison, that it must be talking about the similar case. Yachid Nasi Mashiach. What about those? A regular person, a king, or a Kohen Gadol. If they do Avodah Zarah, the sacrifice that it says for them is that they bring a seira. So, but how do I know what type of Avodah Zarah it is? What exactly did they do? It says V'im nefesh achas. It says if someone. Well, nefesh achas, that could be anyone. Echad Yachid, Echad Nasi, Echad Mashiach b'mashma. That could be all of those. Could be a regular person, could be the king or a Kohen Gadol. However, when it says V'im nefesh achas, Vav Ma'asav Alinian Rishon V'Lamed Tachten Mina El Yain. Because the first paragraph was talking about the tzibur, and I know the tzibur is talking about Zedai Karis Shigasi Chatas because it takes me back to Me'ene Ya'eda. It goes back from Shlach back to Parshas Vayikra, And over there, I knew that it was. I knew that it was a daini kares v'shigasi chatas. How do I know over there? Because because of Aleha. Aleha taught me. Okay. We're doing good. Rabbanan, they had Aleha already. They used it. I mean, last 8 blot. They were telling me that Aleha tells me that you can't do Yibam in the case of Erva. How do they know the concept of which sacrifices are brought for which sin if that's learned from Aleha? So the Rabbanan goes like this: Rabbanan, Haisvarim Minalahu. Where do they get this from? So they have another source. Now after that, we're gonna say, so what does he do with the other source? So Nafkalu midakari la Rabbi Shua Berei. Midamakri le Rabbi Shua Berei. Midamakri le. They learn it from the way Rabbi Shua read it to his son. All right. What does it say? At the end of the sacrifice in Shlach of Vim Nefesh Achas, over there it says, and it continues, it actually says, you know what's going on over there? When it says, all of these laws is all connected to Avodah Zarah. In what way? It's compared. Just like by Avodah Zarah, it has to be Zedoni Kares V'Shegasi Chatas. How do I know that? Because it says V'Nichrasa. I don't know why we ignored that fact in the first one. It was so obvious in the pasuk. It says V'Nichrasa. So Afkal Davar Shachyaman Al Zedoni Kares V'Shegasi Chatas. Also, all those other sacrifices back in Vayikra, when there's a sin, every time it's a Karban Chatas, it's because the daini kares shegasi chatas. If it's done on purpose, it would be excision. Then if it's done by mistake, it's a chatas. Gemara says that's good. Ashkachan yachid v'nasi Mashiach bein b'avedis kav bein b'shar mitzvos tzibur b'avedis kav minayin. So far, you're doing well with telling to the Rabbanan. You got it all in there without Aleha. You got everything except for one thing. Tzibur b'avedis kav. The congregation that does Avodah Zarah, how do you know that that's only the Avodah Zarah that's the daini kares shegasi chatas? So Amakra v'im nefesh. I read the beginning of the paragraph of the Yachid, and over there it says v'im nefesh, and which means if someone would commit this sin, and I go back v'yalamid elyon mitachtam. What was the paragraph before? The paragraph before was about the tzibur. The paragraph after, the lower one on the page, it means the one after, that's Nefesh Achas. So I know that it's going to be the same as the one coming. The preceding one is the same as the one coming because it has a vav that's connecting them. But how if I go back to Parshas Vayikra, how do I know that the congregation also, when they have a sin, which they bring a par helam davar shel tzibur? Yeah. Well, the first way we learned it. In Rebbe, we learned it that v'yalamed tachten me'elyon, and now we're learning v'yalamed elyon mitachten. As we know more from the second, according to this, we know more. Yeah, usually it works v'yalamed tachten me'elyon. Yeah, usually, right. But over here, the fact that there's a vav means that it's got to be the same. If it says and. Right. Yeah, what do they call it? Consecutive vav. So, I only knew from the Nefesh Achas, from the Torah Achas, back to Sefer Vayikra, but that was all for the individual. I didn't get the tzibur. So for Avodah Zarah, I get the tzibur from the vav in V'yalamed elyon mitachten. But how, when I go back to those early portions in Vayikra, when I go back to that, how do I know that it's only a davar shechayaven al zedoni kares al shegasi chatas? So it says like this: Yalef me'eni me'eni. That's not a problem. Once I have the tzibur by Avodah Zarah, because of the vav that connects the second paragraph to the first paragraph, then I do ene, and that takes me back to Sefer Vayikra, and I know that it's all the same type of sin. But Rebbe, we go back to the first way of learning this. Rebbe had it worked out differently. He said that Allah teaches it to me, and then I went from Allah, I went to La'ashma Sa'am, and then from Ashma Sa'am, I went to Mitzvah, and then finally I got B'im Nefesh Achas that connected it. Hai Torah Achas Mayavidlei. The Rabbanan did this with one pasuk, combined everything together. We had like the whole, what does Rebbe do with that Torah Achas Yelachem that resolved all our issues? It says, he needs it for a certain brisa. It says, there is a difference when it comes to Avodah Zarah. There's a difference between if the entire congregation does Avodah Zarah, if an individual does Avodah Zarah, or if a city does Avodah Zarah. If a city does Avodah Zarah, it's called the Ir Nidachas. If the entire congregation does Avodah Zarah, then that was that pasuk before of Einei Ya'eda, of the Tzibur B'Avodah Zarah. But now we're saying we divide up if an individual does Avodah Zarah or if a city does Avodah Zarah, not the whole congregation, just the city. We find there's a distinction. It says Yechidim B'Skila. If an individual does Avodah Zarah, he gets Skila. Fikach Mamayim Palat. It says, and their money is rescued, is saved, it doesn't get destroyed. Merubin, but if a lot of people do Avodah Zarah, that's referring to the city of Ir Nidachas. B'Sayif, they get killed by the sword. And they lose the money. Yachal nechalek b'karbanei sayim. Let's say it was b'shaygig by the Ir Nidachas. Should there be a different sacrifice? By the Yachid that does Avodah Zarah, we know what he does. We know what he brings. He brings a se'ira, a goat. The community does Avodah Zarah b'shaygig. So they bring a par lechatas and a sa'ir, a par la'oila and a sa'ir lechatas. What about an Ir Nidachas? It's not the community because it's not the roiv, it's not the majority of the congregation. It's also not an individual. So I could have thought that maybe there's supposed to be a different sacrifice here. So therefore the Torah says, Talmud Laimar, Torah Achas Yelachem. No, it's a regular individual sacrifice. They would each bring the se'ira. Right. Right. Maskefler Rab Chilkim Agruna. Chilkim Agruna says, one second. Time of the Kasav Rachmana Torah Achas Yelachem, Halav HaChayav Min Nechalik. The Gemara does this often in Yevamos. So far. What were you thinking before you had that answer? Play it out. Why do you really need that answer? What would you have come up with if you didn't have that answer of Torah Achas? Would you say, my lycée, what are your options? It's like a chess game. What are your options? What could you have done anyway? So, lycée par. Oh, okay, we'll bring a bull. It says, you can't bring a bull. Tzibur b'shar mitzvahs with the mice. We know that Avodah Zarah has to be different. And since there's a sacrifice called a par halam davar shel tzibur, we're not going to bring that same sacrifice for Avodah Zarah. Okay, you know what? You'll do kispa. You'll bring a lamb, female lamb. Yachid b'shar mitzvahs with the mice. That's a regular karban chatas is a lamb, female lamb. So you bring a sar. You'll bring a male goat. It says nasi b'shar mitzvahs with the mice. That's what the nasi brings. He brings the king that does avera. He brings the goat. Well, maybe you'll do parla oila v'sar lechatas, which that's what the community does when they do Avodah Zarah. Tibur b'avedus chavhu d'maisi. That's only if the whole congregation does, not when a city. Velamai. So what are you left with? Seira, a female goat. That wasn't one of the options yet, right? Who brings the seira? Yachid nami hani karbana. That's when a regular person does it, and that's your answer anyway. When you say terachas, that's what you're left with. So you need terachas to tell me what you were going to come up with anyway. We say yitzchich. No, I could have thought something else. Sel kedai tchamina hayol v'tzibur b'hira. Maisi par loyla v'sar lechatas. I could have thought since the congregation b'hira, when they paskin about Avodah Zarah, that what they're allowed to do, and they make a mistake. They say that a certain type of service is permissible. They bring the par loyla v'sar lechatas. Inunami neisi yipcha. They should bring the opposite. They should bring not a par la'oila. And sar lachatas, they'll bring a par lachatas and a sar la'oila. They're nidachas. How would we come up with? Why is you coming up with this? I don't know. Only other option, right? Inami tzarach vein takana, or maybe they have to bring a sacrifice, but we don't have a sacrifice available, so there's going to be no sacrifice for them. Kamash malan that there is a sacrifice. It gave us two options, things that I could have thought, and it says kamash malan tarachas. Okay, so Rebbe uses tarachas. Doesn't tell me what the Rabbanan were thinking. Probably because the Gemara could have said, "Well, we would have thought that anyway," or something. What happens in the end? Terachas. It's the same. Okay. You ready? Here it goes. All of that was easy. Amar Levi Lerebbe. Start a new sugi. We're done with this aleha now. It's like we're finished. Now we go back to the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, there were 15 cases of possible relatives that could end up being the Yevama. And because of that, you can't do Yibam or Chalitza. Okay. So Levi tells to Rebbe, "My area the Tani Tesvav listening test Zion. Why do you only say 15? Why don't you say 16?" So Amalei, so he responds, apparently he doesn't have a brain in his skull. Who's he talking this? Who's he saying this to? Maybe he's telling it directly to Levi, but he didn't want to say that you don't have. He says, apparently he doesn't have. My daitach, now he's talking directly to him. He says, what are you thinking? Imai anusas aviv. Imai anusas aviv. What did we miss out of it? If you go back to this, we said if the wife of his brother is his own daughter, or if it's his granddaughter, or if it's his granddaughter from his son, or if it's his wife's daughter, his brother's marrying someone. Who's he marrying? So now the brother is deceased, but who is that wife? It could be his daughter's wife. It could be his wife's daughter. It could be his wife's granddaughter, or his other granddaughter from the daughter. It could be his brother married his own mother-in-law, which is possible. How's that possible? His mother-in-law was married, had a daughter. So Ruvain marries that daughter. And then the father-in-law passed away. So the guy's brother marries the mother. It's no problem. Now Shimon passed away. And leaves his mother-in-law without his brother's wife, without a child. Now, the only problem is that there was a child from the first husband. So she had a child, but maybe he didn't have a child. Maybe she had a daughter previously. So whatever the case is, those are relatives. Now, if you noticed, we went through the daughter, his own descendants, his own daughters that could have his own daughter or granddaughter that could have married his brother, the deceased, who's now deceased. It could be his wife's descendants, and it could be his wife's parents, mother, wife's mother, grandmother, etc. What about his own mother? Is it possible for his brother to have married his mother? Now, it's not possible, because how is he a brother? How are they related? You can't marry, even if it's a half brother. But the fact is, if it's not his own mother, which of course he can't marry, it's his Eishes Aviv, it's his father's wife, and he can't marry his father's wife. So it never went in that direction. That path was blocked in Yevamos. We didn't go that way. Okay. However, there is a possibility. Could be that his father had lived with this woman, and had a daughter. That daughter, Reuven marries. All right. Then his father ends up marrying his own brother, not his father, his wife's mother, his mother-in-law. Here, let's say Yaakov, all right, doesn't marry. I don't want to use Rachel Leah because I want to use that for the wives. Yaakov doesn't marry Sarah, but he lives with Sarah, and Sarah gives birth to Leah. Okay, so Reuven marries Leah. Now, I don't know, that would be the mother-in-law. Let's do it differently. Yaakov marries Sarah and gives birth, not marries, he lives with Sarah and she gives birth to Reuven. All right. So who's the parents of Reuven? Sarah and Yaakov. The only thing is they weren't married. Okay, now Yaakov from another wife has Shimon. Okay. Now Shimon to Sarah, he's not allowed to marry because it's his. No, Shimon to Sarah is allowed to marry. They're not related at all. Happens to be his brother's mother, but Yaakov never married her. So let's say Shimon actually marries Sarah. Now Shimon passes away. Now Reuven has to do Yibum on his own mother. So Levi's telling Rebbe, how come the Mishnah only has 15? There should be a 16th, his own mother. So the Gemara says, what do you want to say? Ima Yanusa Saviv. You want to say because it's someone that, over here it's calling like that, someone that his father raped, but it just means wedlock. Ima Yanusa Saviv, pluk to the Rebbe Yehuda v'Rabbanani. That happens to be a machlekes. Is a person allowed to marry a woman that his father raped? And Rabbi Yehuda says no. So there's actually a machlekes. So how does Shimon end up marrying Sarah in this case? Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow it. Well, he asked the Rabbana. But we don't want to get into this machlekes, and so therefore Rabbi responds, "Pluk the Kamari." The Mishnah doesn't have machlekes in yet. Remember that when it says Avram Hashem Berachas Avram Bakal. So there's a machlekes what Bakal means. So one opinion is Bakal is a daughter. So they ask if Bakal means that Avram had a daughter. So why does Yitzchak have to go over there to Haran to find the wife? He had a daughter. Avram had a daughter. So yeah, it was before Matan Torah, he can marry whatever. So they said no, it was a machlekes, and Yitzchak didn't want to marry into machlekes. Okay, so we're not quoting anything that's a machlekes. Machlekes, if that case exists, the Gemara says, "V'loi, really? Our Mishnah doesn't have machlekes in? You're not going to get away with that. There's got to be a machlekes. Watch." In the next chapter, we have a discussion about if you do chalitza, if the marriage was not acceptable, not because of a real erva, but it wasn't acceptable because of other problems. Let's say it was he had married a mamzer, a mamzeres, I should say, or a nesina. Or it may be a type of relative that's a usher, not as a isser karis, only isser lav. For example, if someone marries the mother's mother, the grandmother, that's considered it's called a shnia. It's a relative. but because it's a little bit removed, it's not the original. It's not like marrying his mother. It's his grandmother, and so that is it's forbidden, but it's not kares. So do you have to do chalitza in that case? Of course, you can't do yibam, but you have to do. Okay, so it's a machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbanan, but it's not in our chapter. So he says it's in the next chapter. It says Bepirkin like kamrinan. I'm talking about our chapter. I'm not talking about chapter 2. Chapter 2 we have machlekes in. Chapter 1 there's no machlekes. It says it's not correct what you're saying. Beis Shammai is going to say that Yibam is not performed on the erva itself, but the tzara, the co-wife, Yibam is performed. So far, everything that we learned about that was all the opinion of Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai is about to show up and tell us that that's not so. So you see, we are talking about machlekesen. So he gets away with this also.
Were these questions only in theory?
Is it a conversation, Levi and Rebbe?
No, it's not saying theory, like this Beis Shammai. Is this in theory of conversation, or are they dealing with actually a situation that occurred?
That's going to be.
Then it's like,
that's going to be a big sugya starting from Daf Yud Gimel. What Beis Hillel what their Beis Hillel's opinion were about Beis Shammai, because they probably actually married women that Beis Hillel would have said are mamzer, the children end up being mamzer. How would they treat each other? If this were, that's a big sugya. Yeah. So what Rebbe responds to this is Beis Shammai b'makom Beis Hillel ein a Mishnah. It's not Beis Shammai is nothing. Doesn't count. It's not a machlekes. It's not even a machlekes. It's not even a machlekes. Okay. Okay, we have another case. You have to be afraid of a small daf of Gemara with a lot of Rashi. So there is a machlekes, Reb Shimon and Rabbanan, regarding if we said ki yeshvu achim yachdav, if brothers are alive together and one of them passes away, so then the brother does yibam on the widow. But let's say the brother passed away and a third brother's born. The Reuven and Shimon are living together. And
before or after?
Well, this is going to be two cases here. Let's say after. The easy one is after. After the brother passes away, so then Levi cannot do yibum on Reuven's wife because they weren't there together. Right. But Shimon would have to. In this case, Shimon would have to. Yeah, the reason why what happened now is so Shimon does chalitza, and then Shimon passes away. So now does Levi have to do because of Shimon's wife? So we said that was considered a tzara to the woman, to Reuven's wife, which is now attached to Shimon because they were co-wives under Shimon. So Shimon had his own wife, and now so Levi wouldn't have to do yibam on that. The only thing is that there's a machlekes here where Reb Shimon says that if Levi is born after Shimon already does yibam on Reuven's wife, Reb Shimon says that Reuven's wife has no connection at all to Levi, and she was never forbidden to Levi because he just showed up now. So now when Shimon passes away, Levi can do yibam on Reuven's wife, which is now Shimon's wife, because there's no problem there. And the Rabbanan said no, because the Rabbanan say that the fact is it's still his brother's wife without the mitzvah of yibam. Follow? So yibam the achar kach noilad is a machlekes. Mace Yibim in Nailad, then that would be a machlekes. That's a machlekes. And nevertheless, so that was one of the cases.
I'm perturbed about the Beisham come Besilo.
In a Mishnah, yeah, that's a Gemara in Brachas already. We don't count that.
Just think it's
No, we don't. We do it only with Beis Shammai. Yeah, why is that? I'm not sure. But the case number 14 in the Mishnah was Eishes Achiv Shleya Beilamai. Turns out that's a machlekes between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. So the Gemara answers, "B'noiled al b'seif yibim like polig Reb Shimon." Noiled al b'seif yibim. That's right. If he's born before the yibim takes place, then Reb Shimon agrees that it's aser. Okay, so even though the wording of the Mishnah could fit into a case of machlekes, but that wasn't the case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah was a case where there's no machlekes. Gemara says, "V'amar Rabbi Shia chalakay Reb Shimon af b'rishayna," but Rabbi Shia says that Reb Shimon argues on that. It says, "I taisi Rabbi Shia." We had a question later on Daf Yotches where we have a question on Rabbi Shia and Rabbi Shia. It's not an issue. Okay. V'amar Rav Yudah Marav v'chein tanu Reb Chia b'kulan ani kair behem asur lezeh muteres lezeh v'asur lezeh muteres lezeh v'achayse sheyavimta chiletes oimes yabemes. Okay. Get ready. I don't even know how to do this. I need little figures. I can show you pictures. I don't know if it's going to help. Let me explain to you what's going on. If I have three anything more than two brothers, let's say I have three brothers, or this case is going to be four brothers. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. All right. Reuven and Shimon marry Rachel and Leah. All right. Levi and Yehuda, they're out there. Whatever. Reuven and Shimon pass away. Now Levi or Yehuda could do Yibam on the wife of Reuven and the wife of Shimon. The only problem is that if he does Yibam on the wife of Reuven, the problem is that she's the sister of another wife, which is called Zikukasai, which creates a problem, even though it's not his own. He's not marrying her, but because there's an attachment, so he can't do Yibam on either one. And the same with Yehuda. You can't do Yibam on either one. It's called a Chaysa Kukasa. However, if it turns out that there's a relationship between Levi and Rachel, besides for the fact that it's his brother's wife. You see, Reuven, let's say Reuven marries Leah. That's how we always set it up. Reuven marries Leah, and Shimon marries Rachel. Let's say Levi has a relationship with Reuven's wife, with Leah. Let's say, not a relation. They're related in another way. How are they related? Very easy. Levi was married to Sarah, and they have a daughter. The daughter's name is Leah. Nice girl. She decides to marry her uncle Reuven. So now Reuven is married to Levi's daughter. Yehuda marries, I don't know, Rivka, and they have a daughter. Her name is Rachel. Rachel decides to marry Shimon. So now Reuven and Shimon pass away. Now Levi can't do Yibam on Leah because that's his daughter. So once he can't do Yibam on Leah, so that divides up the Zika, the connection, and he only has a connection to Rachel, and Yehuda doesn't have a connection to Rachel because Rachel is his own daughter. He only has a connection to Leah. So ha'asura lazeh muteres lazeh. Now this this way of making these combinations is, if we take a look again in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav, and Rabbi Chia also says, if I can create a case where when I have two wives of two brothers that require Yibam, they passed away, the brothers passed away, if I can create a relationship between both, that both of them are related to one, one of those wives, crisscross or whatever, then the other one is going to be mutter and it's not considered achayse kukase, then I'm going to be able to do this. Now, what Rashi does over here is he goes through all 15 cases of the Mishnah with his daughter and his granddaughter and his wife's daughter and his wife's granddaughter, the other granddaughter, his mother. How is it possible that they're both of them have that connection? Like we just did the daughter one, but you can really do it that it's the mother-in-law, and you can really do it that it's you can. So Rashi goes through all of this. Okay, so what are we looking for? We're trying to get a machlekes out of this, and then we're going to say that's what he mean. We have other cases that are machlekes. Now, what does Rab Chia mean, and what does Rav mean? Who said this? It's either Rab Chia or Rav. Rab Yehuda Metargim. Rab Yehuda explains it's not really all 15 cases. It can't be the first 6 cases. He says, my timer, kiven de bitai ba'insin mishkachas, b'nesuin lei mishkachas la, b'nesuin kamari ba'insin lei kamari. How could we're looking for the daughters of, we're looking for the Efshalabite shall moving. Yeah. In order for this to be achayse kukase, for them to be sisters, how is it possible that there's 2 sisters that are married to two brothers, and one of the brothers is, or both of the brothers are mothers, are fathers of these girls? There's a problem here. We're looking for a case where there's a relationship. There's 4 brothers. 2 of them are married to 2 sisters, and the other 2 brothers are going to come in and do Yibam. And the reason why they're allowed to do this is because one of them is the father of one of them, and the other one is the father of the other one. Sounds great. So far, it's great. The problem is that you said that they're sisters. How are they sisters? Obviously from the mother. That means Levi and Yehuda had married the same woman. In order for Rachel and Leah to be sisters, and also to be the daughter of Levi and the other one, the daughter of Yehuda, they would have to, Levi and Yehuda would have had to marry the same woman, which they can't marry the same woman, because you can't marry your brother's wife, even if they're divorced. You can't marry your brother, the sister-in-law. It must be that the mother of Rachel and Leah was raped by Levi and Yehuda. This one woman was raped by Levi and raped by Yehuda, and they're not married, and so they have two daughters, and the two daughters, one of them, the father is Levi, one of the fathers is Yehuda, and because of that, this is able to work out. So Rav Yehuda says that because our Mishnah is not dealing with rape, it's only dealing with actual relationship with marriages. So then this whole discussion is only going to be able to start 6 cases in from Chamaisa. Given the bitam and asas mishkachas, ba'insin mishkachas, b'nesun le mishkachas, b'nesun kamari, ba'insin le kamari. Okay, that's one interpretation so far of what Rav and Rab Chia meant when they said that in this case, asur lazeh, muteris lazeh, that because one of them is already related, so then the other one, Yibam could be performed on the other one. Abaye says no. Going back to the beginning, could be bitem nesasi. And it's 1 second. Since it's a possible case, to have a to have a. But the case of Eshes Achiv Shleya Belamei, the brother that wasn't married, I'm sorry, the brother that wasn't born, when Reuven was alive, so that's a machlekes. That doesn't apply to that. You can't have this case. My timer. This is only going to be possible according to Reb Shimon, and we're not dealing with the machlekes. Okay, let me tell you the case over here. Let's see. So far. Okay, so there's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi and Yehuda, right? In his case, Reuven marries Rachel, all right, and yeah, we always do Leah. I'm looking at his pictures. Over here, there's Reuven is married to Rachel and Shimon is married to Leah. And Levi and Yehuda exist, and now all of a sudden, Reuven dies. Now, Shimon cannot do Yibam on Reuven's wife because that's his wife's sister, because he was married to Rachel and Leah, right? And they're sisters. So Levi and Yehuda are going to have to do Yibam. So then Yisachar is born, 5th brother. Now, he wasn't around when Reuven was around. Now Levi does Yibam on Reuven's wife. Okay. Now Shimon passes away. And Shimon's wife is now only able to do Yibam on either Yehuda or Yisachar, because Levi is already married to her sister. So at this point, Shimon's wife didn't do Yibam yet, and Zevulun is born. There's now a 6th brother that's born. So she can never marry Zvulun, Shimon's wife, because she wasn't around when Shimon was married. So what happens now? Yehuda ends up marrying Shimon's wife. So who's married now? Reuven and Shimon already passed away. Their wives were now re-yibumed by Levi and Yehuda. And now Levi and Yehuda passed away. And now I have Yisachar and Zevulun, that Yisachar cannot marry Rachel, or cannot marry, Yisachar cannot marry, which is now, I guess, either Levi's wife. He had a problem marrying Reuven's wife because he was only born after Reuven passed away, but he was around when Shimon passed away. And Zvulun can marry, according to Reb Shimon, that says that if the brother passed away and the marriage has already taken place, the Yibum has already taken place, then there's no connection to Reuven. In this case, it would be Shimon. There's no connection, so then you can do Yibum on that wife is eligible. So there is a possible case, but it's only going to be possible if I accept the opinion of Reb Shimon that holds that if the brother passed away and the new marriage was already done and the brother is born, that we don't go back to a previous marriage and say that that woman is forbidden to him. Okay. So Abaya says, my time, when will I have this way of saying that because there's a possibility of these two sisters to be married, one to one brother only and one to the other brother only, that's only according to Reb Shimon, but l'Rabbanan le'mishkachas, so beplukta like a mari, we don't have machlekes. Our mission is not talking about that case. Rav Safra mitargem af eshes achiv shlei b'lam mishkachas la b'shita achim bali b'der Reb Shimon. Rav Safra says no. According to Reb Shimon, we worked it out. The simanach, if you want to remember how this works, it's meis noilad v'yibim, meis noilad v'yibim, that the brother died, then the other brother was born. In our case, it was Yisachar, and then yibum was performed by Levi. Then the other brother died, which was Shimon, and then Zvulun was born. And then Yehuda did the Yibum. Ela Rebbe, according to Rebbe, Hani Klali Leslie. According to Rebbe, since our Mishnah does not allow to have a machlekes, since our Mishnah can't have a machlekes, so Rebbe is not going to be able to keep the Reb Chia and Rav to put it back into the Mishnah to say that if there's two sisters and Hamuteres Lazeh, Sur Lazeh, so Rebbe's not going to be able to incorporate that into the Mishnah. All right, let's leave it there.